Good morning to one and all. I welcome you all for another week of online classes of the Softcore Biotechnology. In the last session, we discussed about Declaration of Helsinki, the ethical guidelines for biomedical research, the virtues and the ethical principles. Then we discussed about ethical issues in production of transgenic animals and GM crops. In today's class, we will discuss further about the bioethics, substantial equivalence, and bioweapons. Similar to transgenic animal production and GM crops, bioethics is very vital in assisted reproductive technology. The ethical concerns in assisted reproductive technology are about the inherent nature of the specific techniques being used and the context in which it is used. So, the entire protocol of assisted reproductive technology is defined by a specific technique that is used. So, what is the inherent nature of the technique? And in what context the technique is used? Because the technology is surrounded by issues of creation and destruction of embryos. That's the reason why a detailed guidelines is available when you perform the assisted reproductive technique, right? Moving further, the bioethic principles are applied to stem cells too. Here, the ethical issues raised for the stem cell research is about the usage and destruction of human embryos in order to obtain embryonic stem cells. There is a very good article published in Journal of Translational Medicine. It's a review article which quotes future research and therapeutic applications of human stem cells, general, regulatory and bioethical aspects. A beautiful review to understand what are the ethical principles associated with the embryonic stem cell research. So bioethics has a role to play in transgenic animal production, the GM crops, assisted reproductive technology, and embryonic stem cells. If we start discussing further about the bioethics and the principles of bioethics, human cloning is an important concept. The Time magazine published in its cover page on February 19, 2001 about human cloning. It says human cloning is closer than you think. Will it be a reality? But human cloning is a very controversial issue. You discuss in any platform, it is always an issue of controversy. Here, human cloning refers to a reproductive cloning and or therapeutic or research cloning. We will not discuss more on human cloning for the reason human reproductive cloning is unacceptable and unethical for many scientists and philosophers, so that most of the countries have banned all kinds of human cloning experiments. Unacceptable and unethical, so that most of the countries they have banned any kind of human cloning experiments. Right? UNESCO in 1997, in the Universal Declaration on the Human Genome and Human Rights, says that practices which are contrary to human dignity, such as reproductive cloning of human beings, shall not be permitted. Note it. Any practice which is contrary to human dignity, bringing the reproductive cloning within this bracket. So practice which is against the human dignity, as reproductive cloning of human beings, shall not be permitted. This was the statement in Universal Declaration on the Human Genome and Human Rights. A resolution in this line was also passed by WHO. What does it say? Human reproductive cloning is against human dignity and urged the member states to prohibit it. So there is a clear statement which says human reproductive cloning is not permitted. Okay? The potential and the power of the technology requires caution. Why do we say so? When we ourselves are the objects of biotechnology, which is true in case of human reproductive cloning. It's not just about human reproductive cloning. We should also think the other face of the technology. When we ourselves are the objects, then the potential and power of the technology needs caution. Right? So, I gave a detailed account on the principles of bioethics in various kinds of research, whether it be in transgenic animal production, GM crops, assisted reproductive technology, or human reproductive cloning. and embryonic stem cells. I hope you people have understood the concepts, right? Next, under the biosafety and bioethics, there is something called as substantial equivalence. A very important concept to be discussed under biosafety and bioethics, more specifically under biosafety. The concept of substantial equivalence is about assessing the risks posed by the GMOs to human health and the environment. Now, what does this mean? The assessment of the effect of GMOs on human health and the environment is all about the substantial equivalence. Right? To understand the substantial equivalence in a simple way, we need to understand the principle on which the concept of substantial equivalence is based. The substantial equivalence is based on the principle that GMOs can be compared. Be careful. You have to be very careful in understanding the terminologies and the definition. The principle of substantial equivalence say that the GMOs can be compared with their conventional counterparts. That means you are comparing a GMO to a non-GMO. That means a comparison is between a genetically modified organism to a non-genetically modified organism. It should be the counterpart. That is, one is modified, the other one is the conventional organism, but it is a counterpart of that. So you are comparing the genetically modified organism with their conventional counterpart that have an established history of safe use. The counterpart or the conventional counterpart will have an established history of safe use. Right? The conventionally bred organism will have an established literature stating that it is safe for the use. Now you have developed a GMO of similar organism. Now you have to compare to the conventional counterpart. So what is the data that you get that speaks about substantial equivalence? Substantially equivalent to the conventional counterpart which has an established history of safe use. This is the concept of substantial equivalence. It means genetically modified organism, when you start comparing with their conventional counterpart, we say, okay, it is having a substantial equivalence features to prove that it is safe, similar to the non-GMO. so that it can be used or widely used. Got it? So it is all about assessing the risk of the GMOs to human health and environment. But how do you assess? You start comparing with the conventional counterpart, and this conventional counterpart will always have an established history of safe use. So if you find some equivalence, then you say, okay, fine, the GMO is also safe to use. This is called as substantial equivalence. The concept of substantial equivalence identifies the similarities and differences between the GMO and its conventional counterpart. When you start comparing between a GMO and its conventional counterpart, that is non-GMO, you find both similarities as well as differences. The outcome is either you have to say the GMO is as safe as the conventional counterpart or the non-GMO, or the second type of outcome is that the GMO is presenting a new or greater risk than its conventional counterpart. Right? So when we start comparing, the similarities and differences are taken into consideration, and the outcome will be either as safe as the conventional counterpart, or the GMO will be presenting any new or greater risk than its conventional counterpart. If it presents a new or greater risk, the analysis will be different. If it is presenting the data which reflects that GMO is as safe as the conventional counterpart, then it is allowed to be used. What we have to remember over here is the concept of substantial equivalence. It does not establish absolute levels of safety. It is only a measure of relative levels of safety. Got it? It is not about absolute levels of safety, but it gives a relative levels of safety, or it measures a relative levels of safety. It says if there is an equivalence of certain similarities, then it is as safe as the conventional counterpart. If not, if it is presenting a new or greater risk than the conventional counterpart, it needs further analysis. Got it? It is one of the principle internationally recognized for environmental risk assessment. As given by the Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety and in Food Safety Assessment by the Codex Alimentaris Commission. Right? Now what does these two concepts say about? In Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety, in Annex 3, Para 5, it quotes like this: risks associated with living, modified organisms or products thereof, namely processed materials that are of living modified organism origin, containing detectable novel combinations of replicable genetic material obtained through the use of modern biotechnology. So such modifications or manipulations or products, whatever you obtain, it should be considered in the context of the risks posed by the non-modified recipients. So whatever the non-modified recipients or parental organism poses a risk, so the modified organisms or the products thereof should also be considered in the context. Right? Whatever the risk associated with the modified organisms or the products thereof should be considered in the context of the risk posed by the non-modified recipients or parental organisms. Then what does Codex Alimentarius Commission principles say? It is the guidelines on food derived from biotechnology. It's about food safety. It reads like, the safety assessment should include a comparison between the food derived from modern biotechnology and its conventional counterpart, focusing on determining similarities and differences. If a new or altered hazard, nutritional or other safety concerns is identified in the process of safety assessment, then the risk associated with it should be characterized in order to determine its relevance to human health. Got it? So whatever the safety assessment that is used to determine the safe use of food derived from biotechnology should be compared for the similarities and differences with its conventional counterpart, and if any new or altered hazard or nutritional or other safety concerns are found, then the risk associated with such issues should be characterized thoroughly in order to determine its relevance to human health. So these two are internationally recognized principles for safe use of modified living organisms or products derived thereof. So these two principles are the components of substantial equivalence. Right. The outcome of substantial equivalence is very well presented by considering three generic principles. So these three generic principles are considered as starting point for the safety assessment, so that you can structure the safety assessment procedure and come out saying it is safe or it is not safe, whether it requires further testing or not, if there is differences between a GMO and its conventional counterpart. Case number 1. These are the generic cases. If the GMOs that are shown to be substantially equivalent to the conventional counterparts, they are regarded as being as safe as their counterpart. Got it? In that case, no further safety considerations are necessary. You have to follow the similar safety consideration that you follow for the conventional counterpart. Whatever the safety considerations you follow for the conventional counterpart, so similar safety considerations to be followed. No further safety considerations are required or necessary. This is case number 1. It clearly says, if it is regarded as being as safe as their counterpart, no further safety considerations are necessary. Then what about case 2? GMOs that are substantially equivalent to the conventional counterpart except for defined differences. Not totally different, but there are differences, and there are specific differences or very few differences between the GMOs and its conventional counterpart. The outcome is need further safety assessment, but you need not check the safety assessment or parameters or all the parameters. Your assessment should focus only on the defined differences that you have observed between a GMO and its conventional counterpart. Only the safety assessment on defined differences. Clear? In case 3, now you have to be very, very careful. GMOs that are not substantially equivalent to the conventional counterpart. Up to now, very few GMOs fall under this category. Very few, very few. I have given one example. We will go through that. Very few GMOs show that they are not substantially equivalent to their conventional counterpart. But why this case is presented is, it is conceivable that with future developments in biotechnology, these kinds of GMOs will be produced. The GMOs which do not have substantial equivalence to their conventional counterpart. Then the concept of substantial equivalence cannot be applied. If they do not have substantial equivalence, the concept of substantial equivalence itself cannot be applied. Got it? A beautiful example of the case 3 was published in on December 20, 2016. That is a variety of maize, GMO NK603. Using the up-to-date molecular profiling methods, scientists at King's College in London, they found that this particular variety, which is widely consumed by humans and animals, differs substantially from its non-GMO relatives. So it's already in use. That is why the reluctancy, I did mention about the concept of the reluctancy by public against the use of products or modified organisms. See, now they have found it that it differs substantially from its non-GMO relatives after being consumed by humans and animals, this particular variety. So now it has to be withdrawn from the market. It has to undergo thorough safety assessment methods. Got it? So these are the three important generic cases to understand and deliberate on the outcomes of the substantial equivalence. So I'll stop my session over here. Thank you for your kind listening. Thank you very much.